Engine Adventures, Victor. Busy Victor runs the Sodor Steamworks. All the engines like him. When I was helping out one day, it was Victor who showed me that really useful engines always listen. One day, Thomas had a special job. He had to look after the steamworks while Victor was away. "Victor will tell you what to do," the Fat Controller said, "so listen carefully." "Yes, sir," smiled Thomas. His firebox fizzed as he steamed away. Everyone liked Victor. He knew how to fix engines big and small. "Are you ready for a busy day?" Victor smiled when Thomas arrived. "I like being busy," Thomas peeped happily. "Listen carefully to what the engines say," Victor explained. "Kevin is here to help." "That's right," chirped Kevin. "Ask me if you get in a fix." But Thomas was too excited to listen. He wanted to get on with his special job. "Don't worry, Victor," he chuffed. So Victor puffed away, leaving Thomas in charge. Before long, Spencer arrived with a scratch on his paintwork. He was surprised to see Thomas. "I'm in charge today," Thomas told Spencer. "I'll check you from whistle to wheels." Kevin was puzzled. "Spencer only has a scratch," he whispered. But Thomas wouldn't listen. "Put Spencer on the hoist, please, Kevin," he said. Then Henry arrived, spluttering and sneezing. "You've been given the wrong coal, Henry," Thomas told his friend. "Oh no," Henry wheezed. "My problem is..." But Thomas thought that he knew best and asked Kevin to fetch Henry's special coal. Next, James puffed into the steamworks. His funnel was blocked with straw and twigs. "You need a new funnel, James, and straight away," Thomas said. "No, Thomas," James began. But Thomas still wasn't listening. He told Kevin to find a spare funnel. Then he looked around the steamworks, feeling proud. Kevin's wheels wobbled. Thomas had given him too many jobs. He bumped backwards into the control panel, hoisting Spencer high in the air. "Haven hooks!" Kevin cried, dropping Henry's coal in surprise. Black coal dust flew everywhere. The engines couldn't see a thing. Henry biffed James, who blew an enormous puff of steam. Soon the whole of the steamworks was covered in soot and straw. "Sizzling Sodor!" said a voice. "What has happened here?" Victor had arrived back early. Thomas looked at Victor, then at the mess and muddle all around. "I'm sorry, Victor," Thomas said. "I was too excited. I didn't listen to Kevin, and I didn't listen to my friends. This mess is all my fault." "You are right," huffed Victor. "But if you listen carefully now, we can fix everything together." This time, Thomas did exactly as he was told. First, they took Spencer down from the hoist. I only need my scratch painting," Spencer said. "And I don't need more special coal. My firebox is making me wheeze," Henry puffed. Thomas listened carefully. Then he fetched paint for Spencer and helped to clean Henry's firebox. "My funnel isn't broken," James told Thomas. "It just needs a clean and polish." Before long, the steamworks were shining and all the engines were fixed. They were ready to be really useful again. Thomas was a wiser engine. "The next time I help out, I promise to listen," he told Victor. Engine Adventures, Oliver. This story is about Oliver, a Great Western engine. His owner didn't want him anymore and sent Oliver to be turned into scrap. Then one night, another engine helped Oliver escape. One day, Edward and Douglas were talking. They had heard that steam engines were being replaced by new diesel engines. "Steamies are being sent for scrap," said Edward. Douglas's wheels wobbled. "I'm glad we work for the Fat Controller," he said. "There will always be steam engines on his railway." That night, Douglas was taking the midnight goods train far across the island to where the diesels worked. Suddenly, he heard a hiss. "Who's there?" asked Douglas. "I'm Oliver," a voice whispered, "and this is my coach and brake van, Isabel and Toad. Are you one of the Fat Controller's engines?" "Yes," Douglas smiled proudly. "Phew," said the voice. Douglas peeped round a truck and saw a little Western engine. "We were trying to escape from the scrapyard, but I've run out of steam," Oliver told Douglas. Douglas wanted to help. "We'll pretend you're ready for scrap, and I'll take you away," he said. Douglas's driver and fireman worked quickly. They wrote scrap on Oliver, Isabel and Toad, took off Oliver's side rods, and stuck on labels saying that Oliver belonged to the Fat Controller. There wasn't time for Douglas to turn around, so he had to run backwards. They were just leaving the station when someone shouted, "Stop!" A foreman shone his torch at Oliver. "A Great Western engine with a Western coach and brake van. You can't take these," he called. But when Douglas's driver showed the foreman the labels, the foreman let Douglas and Oliver go. "That was close," puffed Douglas as they set off down the track. "We hid down an old quarry line for days on our way here," said Oliver. "It was very scary." Douglas felt sorry for his new friend. It was morning by the time they reached the Fat Controller's railway. Douglas showed Oliver an empty siding, nicely hidden away. "Welcome to your new home," smiled Douglas. "Thank you," Oliver smiled back. Later at the sheds, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. They were very excited. "You must tell the Fat Controller, Douglas," Gordon wheezed. "Here I am," said a voice. "Tell me what?" It was the Fat Controller. The engines went quiet. "Excuse me, sir," said Duck at last, "but we need another steam engine, don't we?" "Indeed we do," the Fat Controller boomed. "I know an engine who has been saved from scrap!" Douglas burst out. The Fat Controller was puzzled, so Douglas told him about how he had saved Oliver and his coach and brake van from the scrapyard. "Oliver, Isabel and Toad are just what we need for Duck's branch line," the Fat Controller smiled proudly. "Well done, Douglas." Douglas beamed from buffer to bumper. The Fat Controller sent Oliver, Isabel and Toad to the steamworks to be mended and painted in Great Western colours. Now they puff happily up and down Duck's branch line. Oliver often thinks about the time Douglas came to the rescue and what a lucky escape they had. He is glad to be a really useful engine again. Engine Adventures, Thomas's New Friend. When I caused an accident at the docks, I thought I'd be in trouble. I made up an engine called Jeffrey to take the blame, but everyone wanted to meet my new friend. One day on Sodor, Thomas was in a hurry. He wasn't looking where he was going and bashed into a line of trucks. Bash! Cranky was lowering a crate, but the trucks had shunted Cranky's flatbed up the track. The crate smashed open on the rails and out jumped hundreds of bouncy balls. Some splashed into the sea. "Somebody shoot us!" moaned a truck. Thomas backed away, feeling bad. "It wasn't me," he pretended. "It was, Jeffrey." "Jeffrey?" called Cranky. "I can't see any other engines around here." Everyone wanted to hear about Jeffrey, but there was no Jeffrey. Thomas had made him up. Next, Thomas was passing the steamworks. "Hello, Thomas," said Victor. "Tell me about Jeffrey. Is he a steamy?" That's right," Thomas mumbled. "He's a big red steamy from the mainland." And Thomas puffed quickly away. Soon, everyone was talking about Jeffrey. "I don't suppose he's very fast," huffed Gordon. "He is," said Percy. "He's so fast that no one even saw him leave the docks." "A strange engine on my railway," the Fat Controller said. "Please take me to him, Thomas." "But Jeffrey is very shy, sir," Thomas puffed. The Fat Controller insisted. Thomas had to think quickly. "I can't take you, sir," he said. "Jeffrey is, hiding in Henry's tunnel." "Well, I'm sure we'll find him," said the Fat Controller, scratching his head. "I'll warn Jeffrey you're coming," Thomas called, and he steamed away, backwards, before anyone could tell him to stop. Thomas sped along, with Percy and the Fat Controller chasing after. Percy's wheels felt funny, rolling backwards at such speed. "Wait, Thomas!" Percy peeped. "What's wrong?" Annie and Clarabelle told Thomas to slow down, but Thomas pumped his pistons even faster. When Percy arrived at Henry's tunnel, Thomas was nowhere to be seen. "He must be inside, sir," Percy said. The Fat Controller climbed down from the cab. "Thomas? Jeffrey? Are you in there?" he called. "Yes, sir," Thomas replied. "Will you come out, please, Jeffrey?" the Fat Controller said. Thomas pretended to be Jeffrey. "I can't, sir! I'm too shy!" he called in a funny voice. "Shy or not, you have caused confusion and delay," boomed the Fat Controller. "I'm sorry, sir," said Thomas, still pretending to be Jeffrey. "I'll be good from now on." Thomas's plan had worked. Everyone thought Jeffrey was real. Then there was trouble. The rails began to rumble. Spencer was racing up behind Thomas at full speed. "Fizzling fireboxes!" Thomas wheezed, steaming out of the tunnel. Sparks flew from Spencer's brakes. Screech! He stopped just in time. "Where's poor Jeffrey?" said the Fat Controller. "Who's Jeffrey?" asked Spencer, puzzled. "He's a big red steamy from the mainland," Percy explained. Did you pass him in the tunnel?" The only engine I could see was Thomas," Spencer huffed. The Fat Controller was cross. Thomas knew he had to tell the truth, about the accident, and about Geoffrey. "I'm sorry," he said. "Accidents happen," the Fat Controller replied, "but stories about pretend engines will not do." "It's a shame Geoffrey isn't real," peeped Percy. "He sounded like a really fun engine." Engine Adventures, the Thomas Way. One day, when I wanted to show Harold the sights of Sodor, Duck wouldn't allow it. He was sure there was only one way of doing things, until I showed him the Thomas Way. Duck is a little green tank engine whose real name is Montague. His friends call him Duck because they say that he waddles. Duck came to Sodor from the mainland where he worked on the Great Western Railway. He always does things the Great Western way. One morning, Duck was taking Harold to the Sodor Search and Rescue Centre for repair. Harold was tall and his floats were wide, so Thomas was Duck's back engine. His job was to check that Harold wouldn't bash into anything. Thomas was looking forward to showing Harold some special sights on the way. Up ahead was a narrow bridge. Thomas checked that Harold wasn't too big to cross it. "All clear," he called to Duck. "Shall we show Harold the animal park?" "There are two ways of doing things, Thomas," Duck replied. "The Great Western Way and the wrong way. We must go straight to the Search and Rescue Centre." They soon reached the junction to Knapford. Thomas wanted Harold to see the station, but he knew that Duck would say no. So Thomas decided to play a trick. "Duck," he called, "we need to collect Harold's engineer from Knapford Station." This time, Duck agreed. But when they got there, Harold was too tall to fit in the station. "Stop!" Thomas called to Duck. Duck stopped just in time, but the Fat Controller was cross. "Harold's engineer isn't here," he boomed. "He's waiting at the Search and Rescue Centre." Duck was cross that Thomas had tricked him. "From now on, we will do things the Great Western Way," he puffed. They steamed on, towards a tunnel. "Stop!" Thomas called. "Harold is too wide!" But Duck didn't stop. He wasn't going to fall for Thomas's tricks again. Sparks flew as Harold's blade scraped against the sides of the tunnel. Screech! Duck tried to puff on, but he couldn't. Harold was stuck. Duck's driver had to call for help. Soon a team of engineers arrived. Then the Fat Controller appeared. The Steamy's wheels wobbled with worry. "You two have caused confusion and delay," the Fat Controller said to Thomas and Duck. "Now Harold will need even more repairs." When the engineers had freed Harold, Duck and Thomas set off again. Duck was sorry for not listening to Thomas, and Thomas was sorry for tricking his friend. "But Thomas," Duck worried, "how can we get Harold home without going through any tunnels?" Thomas smiled. "We'll go the Thomas way," he said. This time, Thomas went in front while Duck checked for places that Harold might get stuck. Thomas chose a special route to the Search and Rescue Centre. It wasn't the quickest way, but there were no more accidents. Then Thomas and Duck chuffed home. I think there might be 3 ways of doing things, Duck smiled. The Great Western Way, the Wrong Way, and the Thomas Way. Thomas beamed from buffer to bumper. But the Great Western Way is usually the best, Duck laughed. Engine Adventures. Thomas helps Hero. When Hero had an accident that was my fault, I had to help my friend. I tried to find some spare parts for him, but ended up wheel deep in trouble. Here's what happened. One day, Thomas was in the yard when Hero pulled up next to him. Hello, Hero. You look shiny. Where are you off to? I'm going to Knapford, Thomas said excitedly. Let's go together, Hero laughed. Hero hurried away, with Thomas racing behind. Thomas had to go very fast to keep up. Hero soon slowed down for a sharp bend, but Thomas pumped his pistons even faster. Watch me go! Thomas teased, racing ahead. As Thomas rocked around the bend, his cargo came loose and rolled onto the track. Hero hit the pipes and crashed to a stop on his side. Thomas felt terrible. Rocky and Edward were called to help Hero. A very cross Fat Controller arrived too. Hero was soon back on track, but when he tried to set off, his axles ached and his gears groaned. You'll need to go to the steamworks for repair, said the Fat Controller. That night, Thomas was still feeling sad. It's my fault Hero's broken, he told Percy, and it's not easy to get the parts he needs. Thomas remembered the last time Hero had broken down. He was stuck in the woods for a very long time. Then Thomas had an idea. The next morning, Thomas puffed to where he had first met Hero a long time ago. If I can find some of Hero's old parts, then Hero can be fixed, thought Thomas. Branches snapped and brambles scratched as Thomas searched bravely for spare parts. But he didn't find any. Thomas rolled deeper into the dark and spooky woods, his wheels wobbling. Suddenly, a deer jumped across the track, giving Thomas a fright. He screeched to a stop, but the old rails gave way beneath him. Silly me, said Thomas. It's just a friendly deer. When Thomas tried to move, his wheels just spun in the mud. He was well and truly stuck. Peep! Peep! He whistled. Help! Percy was on a nearby branch line, but he didn't hear Thomas calling. Can anybody hear me? Thomas cried sadly. Later, Harold flew by on patrol. Thomas whistled as loudly as he could. Peep! Peep! That looks like steam from an engine, Harold buzzed. And that sounds like Thomas! Harold hurried away to fetch help, but Thomas thought he hadn't seen him. No one can hear me, Thomas cried. Then suddenly, the rails began to rumble. Rocky bashed through the brambles with Percy behind. Thomas! Boomed the Fat Controller. How did you end up here? I was trying to help Hero, sir, Thomas sighed. Well, let's get you back on track, said the Fat Controller kindly. Later at the steamworks, Thomas told Hero all about his adventure. I'm sorry I didn't find any spare parts to fix you, he sighed.
But Thomas, I am fixed, Hero smiled. The Fat Controller already had some parts for me in case I ever broke down again.
Thomas beamed from bumper to bumper. Hero smiled too.
So, are you ready?
He said. Ready, Thomas wheezed. The two friends set off together, and this time Thomas remembered to slow down for the bend. Engine Adventures, Thomas's Trusty Wheels. The Thing Controller travels by bike. He thinks that 2 wheels are best. Bertie, Spencer and I were sure our own wheels were better, until someone else saved the day. One day, Spencer had an important job. He was taking the Duke and Duchess to Cullen Castle for Lord Cullen's birthday ball. The Duke was bringing a special gift, and he didn't want to be late.
I'll get you to the ball on time, sir,
Spencer promised, and he whistled,
"Peep, peep!"
At Knapford Station, Bertie had brought passengers for Thomas's train. The Thing Controller had arrived by bicycle too. The Fat Controller chuckled when he saw the old bicycle.
"You should get a car like mine,"
he said. But the Thing Controller shook his head.
"2 wheels are best, I always say,"
he smiled.
2 wheels? Bertie beeped. "Everyone knows that 4 wheels are best."
How can 4 wheels be better than 6? Thomas replied. Just then, Spencer steamed in.
20 wheels are the best by far,
he boomed. They were still arguing when Spencer remembered he had to hurry to the birthday ball. Spencer was puffing proudly down the main line when suddenly there was a hiss. Spencer had to stop. He had burst a safety valve. The Duke was worried.
"How are we going to get to Cullen Castle on time now?"
he sighed. Thomas soon caught up with Spencer. "Have your 20 wheels stopped working already?" he teased. Spencer frowned. Now Thomas would have to take the Duke and Duchess to the ball. They climbed on board and Thomas puffed away. "6 wheels to the rescue!" Thomas smiled. Thomas hadn't gone far when he had to stop too. Just around the bend, a tree had fallen across the tracks. "Cinders and ashes!" Thomas cried as he screeched to a halt. "Sorry," Thomas called to the Duke and Duchess, "but we can't carry on." Before long, Bertie beeped by.
"Toot toot!"
Thomas showed him the tree on the line.
"4 wheels are best,"
Bertie boasted.
"I'll take the Duke and Duchess by road."
So the Duke and his wife climbed on board. Next, it was Bertie's turn to stop when his front tires rolled over some pins. Pop! Pop! The Thing Controller was passing on his bicycle.
"I'll go and fetch help," he said. "You can trust 2 wheels."
And off he rode to find a telephone box. Minutes later, Harold came buzzing overhead. He landed safely next to Bertie.
"Hop on board,"
Harold called to the Duke and Duchess.
"I'll get you to Cullen Castle."
Holding onto their hats, they climbed into Harold's cockpit. Then Harold whirred away. By the evening, Spencer's safety valve had been fixed. Rocky had cleared the tracks for Thomas, and Bertie had new tyres. What a day, said Thomas, and we still don't know how many wheels are best. Suddenly, there was a whirring noise in the sky. It was Harold on his patrol. Thomas smiled. It was Harold who saved the day, he peeped, and he didn't use any wheels. Hooray for helicopters! Spencer cheered. Engine Adventures, the Snowy Special. When snow came to Sodor, Henry was the only engine who didn't get stuck. He thought his trucks must be lucky. But how would Henry get on without his lucky trucks? Winter had arrived on Sodor, and the island was covered with snow. The tracks were icy and slippery, and many of the lines were blocked by snowdrifts. Henry puffed happily through the snowy countryside. None of his lines were blocked. Henry was the first engine to arrive back at the sheds that evening. All his friends were late. Thomas rolled in next. Well done, Henry, he chuffed. You must have lucky trucks. Maybe you're right, Thomas, Henry smiled. And Henry went to sleep, feeling proud of his lucky trucks. But the next morning, Henry's lucky trucks weren't in the yard. Henry gasped. Edward took your trucks, Thomas explained. He's delivering coal to the villagers. The Fat Controller arrived. A delivery of presents is waiting at the airport, he told Henry. You must take a gift to all the children in the villages. Henry set off nicely, but the rails at Gordon's Hill were very slippery. Every time Henry tried to puff up the hill, he slid back down. It took a long time to reach the top. I need my lucky trucks, Henry worried. I must find Edward right away. Henry steamed on through the snow, but soon he had to stop. Some logs had rolled off James's flatbed and were blocking Henry's way. Bust my buffers! Cried Henry. This would never have happened if I'd had my lucky trucks. You should be at the airport, James snorted. Not without my lucky trucks, Henry replied. I must find Edward first. Henry shivered sadly, while Rocky set to work clearing the track. Don't worry, Henry, Rocky rumbled. You'll soon be on your way. Rocky was right. The tracks were quickly cleared, and Henry steamed away to find Edward. But everywhere that Henry chuffed, there were more delays. Hurry, please, Thomas, Henry wheezed. I need to find Edward and my lucky trucks. Thomas puffed as quickly as he could to clear the snow, but it was hard work. Henry had to wait. I'll never find my lucky trucks, Henry sighed. But at the snowy forest, Henry did find his lucky trucks, and Edward too. Henry beamed from bumper to bumper. He tried to stop, but his wheel slid on the icy tracks. Henry crashed straight into the line of trucks. Bash! My lucky trucks are broken, Henry cried. Henry sat sadly in the snow. He didn't want to go anywhere without his lucky trucks. But they're broken, said Edward, and the presents still need collecting. Henry thought about how sad the children would feel if they didn't have a present to open. I must get to the airport, he puffed.
with or without my lucky trucks.
Henry set off slowly. His wheels slipped and slid on the icy rails, but he kept going. The more Henry thought about the children, the less he thought about his lucky trucks. At last, he arrived at the airport. He collected the presents and puffed away to begin his deliveries. Henry steamed all over the island until he had just one delivery left. Some children were waiting for him at the station. "Hooray for Henry!" they cheered.
"I didn't need my lucky trucks after all,"
Henry smiled. And when he looked at the children's smiling faces, he felt like the luckiest engine on Sodor. Engine Adventures: The Snowy Surprise. This story is about what happened one snowy winter. Percy and I worked together to make sure our friends in the mountain village had a happy Christmas. One snowy Christmas Eve, the Fat Controller visited Thomas and Percy.
"Take Thomas's coaches and deliver the Christmas post to the village, please," he told Percy. "Thomas will help clear snow today."
Thomas was sad. "I won't be able to wish the villagers a happy Christmas," he frowned. "Don't worry, I'll do it for you," Percy smiled. Percy set up the mountain with Annie and Clarabelle. Snow wasn't going to slow him down. Through the falling snowflakes, Percy saw a red glow ahead. When he got closer, he saw that it was a fogman holding up a warning light.
"Snow has blocked every road and track to the village," the fogman called. "You must fetch help, Percy."
Percy had to help the villagers stuck in the snow. He thought of an idea. He left his carriages in a siding and steamed to see Harold at the airport. "Peep, peep! Wake up!" whistled Percy. "The mountain villagers need our help."
"Right away!"
Harold buzzed, and off he flew to tell the Fat Controller. On his way back to the yard, Percy met Thomas. The Fat Controller had received the call for help and sent Thomas to take Terence the tractor and a works train to help the villagers. "Thank you for looking after my friends, Percy," puffed Thomas. "Now follow me." Percy buffered up behind Thomas's heavy train, and they set off for the village. Thomas's snowplow cleared the tracks, but climbing the mountain was hard work. Thomas and Percy had to go very slowly. When they tried to go faster, their wheels slipped and spun on the icy rails, but they kept going together. Then at last, "There's the village!" Thomas called. Percy was very tired, but he huffed his hardest until the train was safely in the station. Just then, Percy heard a buzzing noise in the sky. It was Harold. He was dropping parcels of food for the villagers and their pets. Then Terence got to work. With his strong caterpillar tracks and snowplow, he cleared the snow so that people could walk safely and drive their cars.
"Snow is super stuff,"
chuffed Terence cheerfully. The children thought so too. They loved sledging down hills and making snowmen. At last, the snowstorm passed. Terence ploughed the last road in the village and rolled back onto Thomas's flatbed. Percy went to fetch Annie and Clarabelle from the siding. He still had all the Christmas posts to deliver to the villagers. By the time he returned, Toby had brought hot chocolate and mince pies for the tired workmen and villagers. Soon it was time for the engines to puff home.
Well done, Percy! Well done, Thomas! The villagers cheered and waved. Thank you for giving us a happy Christmas.
The engines smiled. They loved to be really useful. When Thomas and Percy had gone, the villagers planned a special surprise to thank the engines. That night, the villagers packed Toby's carriage full of parcels. Then Toby puffed through the snowy countryside to the yard as quietly as he could. Thomas and Percy were fast asleep after their busy day. The villagers tiptoed into the shed carrying the parcels. Toby wondered what the surprise was going to be. Thomas gasped when he woke up on Christmas morning. Cinders and ashes! He smiled. The shed had been decorated with fairy lights and tinsel, and there was a real Christmas tree with presents underneath. What a magical Christmas! Said Percy. Surprises always make the best Christmas presents, Thomas peeped. Engine Adventures. Stay safe with Thomas. This is a story about how I found out about being safe on the tracks. Enjoy the story and look out for things that you can do to stay safe near railways. Thomas the Tank Engine had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. Thomas was a cheeky little engine. He thought he knew everything there was to know about the Fat Controller's railway. One morning, the Fat Controller came to the sheds to give Thomas his jobs for the day.
Thomas, it is your job to keep yourself and all your passengers safe, warned the Fat Controller. You must never be silly when you're out on the tracks.
But Thomas didn't listen. He was in a silly, cheeky mood. He rushed to the water tower to fill up his boiler before he started his day. Having fun is more important than being safe, he giggled as he let out a huge burst of steam. Once Thomas was clean, his coaches Annie and Clarabelle were coupled up to him and off they went. Thomas saw his friend Bertie driving along the road ahead of him. I can't be slower than a bus, he thought. Thomas sped up and raced Bertie through the countryside. A little further along, the road turned and crossed the track. Why are you waiting there? Teased Thomas as he whooshed past Bertie at the level crossing. Don't you want to race? But Thomas didn't stop to hear Bertie's reply. He sped on past the farm. There are animals close to the track, Thomas, warned Annie. Don't go too fast. But Thomas didn't listen. He raced the horse. Thomas was going faster than ever before. He was going so fast that he couldn't stop at the next station. He just whooshed through. Slow down! Called the station workers. When Thomas eventually managed to stop, the Fat Controller was cross.
What you did today was very dangerous, Thomas, said the Fat Controller. It was wrong to encourage Bertie to race. Anyone using the road must stop if the level crossing gates are closed or if there is a red light.
Then the Fat Controller reminded Thomas about the time a gate had been left open. A herd of cows had wandered onto the tracks and it had nearly caused a nasty accident.
People must always close gates behind them, said the Fat Controller. and engines must watch out for animals. While you're at a station, continued the Fat Controller, you must watch out for children standing too close to the tracks and for people who might have dropped something on the tracks. Always tell children to stand back, Thomas, he continued, and if anyone has dropped something on the track, they must talk to someone who works at the station and never try to get it themselves.
Keeping everyone safe is a big important job, replied Thomas.
It is, said the Fat Controller, but I'm here to help and so are the engineers on the railway. They work in all weathers to keep the tracks clear and safe for the engines and the passengers.
As the stars came out and Thomas made his way back to the engine sheds, he knew that being safe and reminding passengers to keep safe was the most important thing of all. Peep, peep! He tooted to the engineers, working through the night to keep the railway running safely.